What's up, everybody? Happy Wednesday, the 2nd of January 2019. We're back with another Exercism Elixir problem that I will solve live in front of you. I haven't seen the ones that I haven't done before, so this is going to be me solving them straight out in front of you, never having seen them before. Today we're up to phone number, and what I'll do is I'll jump into the phone number problem. If anyone's not familiar with Exercism, Exercism is a website that has programming challenges in lots of different languages. I'll jump over to the language tracks page and you can see the ones that I've joined. I've got elixir-lang. Let me see, I'll just chuck it onto the screen now. Yep. So I've joined elixir-lang, JavaScript, Python, and Ruby. There are a bunch of other ones and you can practice all of them with little programming problems that you can do daily or any other time that you want. I am going to do the phone number problem in the Elixir track today, and I haven't seen this yet. I won't go through the README here on this page. I'm going to do it in VS Code. So let me first just download this problem, and we'll jump over into VS Code and open it up. This is another project that I'm working on. If we jump over to Exercism, I will open the phone number problem. There we go. Pause my music. Let's have a look. So as always, let's open the README and jump right in. So the problem today is phone number. Clean up user-entered phone numbers so they can be sent SMS messages. The North American numbering plan is a telephone numbering system used by many countries in North America like the United States, Canada, or Bermuda. All NAMP countries share the same international country code 1. NAMP numbers are 10-digit numbers consisting of a 3-digit numbering plan area code, commonly known as area code, followed by a 7-digit local number. The first 3 digits of the local number represent the exchange code, followed by the unique 4-digit number, which is the subscriber number. The format is usually represented as NXX, NXX, 4X, where N is any digit from 2 through 9 and X is any digit from 0 through 9. Your task is to clean up differently formatted telephone numbers by removing punctuation and the country code 1 if present. For example, the inputs +1 blah 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 should all produce the output like that. As this exercise only deals with telephone numbers used in NAMP countries, only 1 is considered a valid country code. Interesting. Okay. So I'm just thinking through before we jump into the tests that this looks like we're just going to be extracting any non-digit numbers and then removing a 1 from the front. Because if we have a look at this, this is the format that N is any digit from 2 through 9. So if that was a 1, that wouldn't be a valid number and the 1 would probably represent the country code at the beginning. But I'm jumping ahead. What I'll do first, as always, is just run the tests to make sure that they're working. Cool. So we have 20 tests, 19 excluded with 1 failure, and that's because we haven't done anything in our phone number module. Let's jump through. So we've got our module document at the top here. Remove formatting from a phone number. Returns blah, blah, blah. If phone number is not valid, okay, so we have our error case. It should return 10 digits. Okay. So we can see here that this is just focused on American numbers. So this is an invalid phone number. Why is this an invalid phone number? Well, it looks like this one, which if we jump back to the README, we've got this format. So that first and fourth number has to be an N, which means that it's 2 through 9. This one is invalid because it's 0, which is not between 2 and 9. So as always, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to send that to io.inspect, our input argument, and I'll load it into IEX. So if we want to load it into IEX, we've got the code here in the test. I've just opened the test file. There's a line at the top which loads the module. If we paste that into IEX, that's then loaded our phone number module. If we jump back, we can see that it's, whoops, the module is called phone, and we have our number. And let's, for example, take this number here, and we'll just paste it in. Okay, so literally our input argument is spat out with io.inspect. All right, so let's start trying to do some stuff with this. So the first thing that I know that we're going to need to do, regardless of anything else, is, for example, if we take this one, which is a valid phone number, let's paste that into our thing. We know that we want to remove everything except digits because we want to return just digits. And I can see here that it's returning a string. So we can get pretty close to what we want out of it by simply doing a string.replace and then just removing anything that's not a digit. So I'm going to use a regular expression to do that. So the regular expression I'm going to use is I'm going to use a match for anything that's not a digit. So this little pattern here is for anything that's a digit. And actually, what we can do, I believe that this is the same thing, which is a capital D rather than a lowercase d. A lowercase d would represent a digit, and uppercase D should represent something that is not a digit. And so what we want to do is replace anything that's not a digit with an empty string. So we'll jump back into IEX, reload the module, and we'll try that. Perfect. So what we've done there is we have removed anything that's not a digit, and we're left with just the digits in the phone number. So I can see here that compared to the number that we're supposed to return, the number that we're getting out of this still has the 1 from the country code. If I jump back to this line, we've still got the country code there. So really what we want is we want all of the digits apart from, well, we want the last 10, the last 10 digits is what we want. That might be one way to do it. Or we could trim the 1 off the front. I'm going to say because we know that we want a 10-digit number, regardless of whether we pass in a 10-digit number or something with 11 digits, including the country code, we just want the last 10. So what I'm going to do is an enum.slice on the char list. So I'm going to use kernel.toCharList. And that should return that as a list of characters. And then what we can do is, because a string is not enumerable, but a char list is, what we can do is we can use enum.slice. And what we want is we want all of the numbers from the last digit, so that's -1, to let's go -10. And I'm not 100% sure if that's correct, but I'm going to just test it here. Okay, so I have messed up there. So maybe we need to do, let's do this in IEX. So assuming we have, let's do this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0. If we pass that to enum.slice, and we do 0.3, what do we get out? Okay, and what about if we do -1.3? So that doesn't work. So maybe we need to do, just thinking here. Let me pull up the docs for enum.slice, because we may be able to pass a length to it. And I think that might be a better way. Okay, so we've got the negative position, but it needs to be going greater. So instead of -1 to -10, let's do -10 to -1. And that gives us the entire thing, which is our 10 digits. Let's see if we pass in 11 digits, that should give us everything except that first one chopped out. So if we make that 9, cool. That's exactly the behavior that we want. And I'm going to chuck that in here. So we've got the char list, enum.slice, and we're going to go from -10 to -1, and that's going to give us the correct range. So if we test that again with this one, we've actually got the correct thing coming out, but it's still a char list, and we need to convert it back into a phone number, a string. So I believe that, how do we do that? I think that we would need enum.join, because we're going from something that, even though, as you see here, this looks like a string, but it's actually not. This is an array, a list in Elixir terms. This is a list. So if I do io.inspect on this, just without any arguments, you can see that. But if I then put char lists false there, you'll actually see the underlying representation of the thing that it's just printed. And you can see there that the actual underlying representation is, you know, a list of integers, 50, 49, 50, 53, etc., right? And that represents our char list of digits in there. So what we have is simply a list. And if we want to turn a list into a string, we use enum.join. I'm going to pull up enum.join in dash just to check that the default joiner is just an empty string. So that's fine. That means there won't be any spaces. So I'll just give you an example back in VS Code in IEX. If we take our, let's go 1, 2, 3, 4, and we pass that to enum.join without any arguments, that has given us, see, this isn't going to work exactly the way we expect, because what it's actually done there is it's joined the integer char codes. So it's converted each one of those into a string. And I can't remember if there's a way in Elixir to turn a char list into a string without using the underlying char code thing. So let's have a look. Let's see if there's any char list. So we've got 2 char list. Let's have a look in string. We'll see if there's something in there that will let us convert the char code into a string, to char list, to float, to integer. So I've forgotten how to do that from a char list to a string. I think probably, maybe if we just use kernel.toString. Okay, so that's worked. So we don't need to use enum.join. We're just going to convert the char list into a string with kernel.toString. So just a point on me writing kernel in front of there, anything that is in the kernel module is automatically loaded. It's imported into every module, so you don't actually need this. That would be just as valid. But I like to prefix it with kernel just to make it clear exactly what function that I'm using and exactly which module that it comes from. So if I ever need to look it up in Dash or anything like that, I know exactly which module to search in to find it. It just makes your code more clear, because if you see a function that you're calling without a module at the front of it, you can know immediately that it's a function from your own module that you're in currently or one that you've imported. So I tend to never import modules. So at the top of your thing, if we did something like, and this is what happens by default. So if we have import kernel, then that's going to import all the functions from kernel and you can use it without prefixing it. What I tend to do is alias, right? And you can alias specific functions within kernel if you want, but if you alias kernel, that's going to pull that in. You don't need to do that actually, because all of the core modules from Elixir, such as enum kernel, they're already aliased because, well, they're not aliased. That is the actual reference to them. So anything kernel, enum, all that sort of stuff, you don't need to do it. But if you've got your own in there, you can alias them rather than importing them, and then you know exactly which module the function came from. All right, anyway, that was a bit of a diatribe. So I'm just going to use kernel.toString to convert our slice. I'm going to reload that in here, and we'll try this one again. And that's exactly what we expect out based on this particular one. So given our happy case, if we pass this in, let's do that in IEX, right? We get that answer. If we pass this into IEX, we get the correct answer. Let's do this one because I know that this case is going to fail. Okay, so this one has assumed that it's correct, but what we need now is some extra levels of checks to make sure that if we pass in an invalid phone number, such as one that has, I forget, this is the exchange code. If the first digit of the exchange code isn't between 2 and 9 inclusive, then it's going to return invalid. So what I'm going to do first, instead of jumping straight into that, is I'm going to run the tests. So if we jump back into IEX, quit out of that, run the tests. So our first test fails. First test passes. Let's do the second test. Second test passes. Third test passes. Fourth test passes. Okay, so this one fails. And let's see here what the test that's failing is. Invalid when country calling code is not 1. Okay, so this one has 2 as the country code. So what we're doing by slicing away the country code is we're removing a piece of information that would help us to validate the phone number. So let's think about the cases that we have. So we have a case where the country code isn't passed. We have a case where a country code is passed. So we have a case where after we replace all of the non-digit numbers, we have something with a length of 10 already, that's without the country code, or something with a length of 11, and that's with the country code. So let's have a look here. What would be the best way to do that? I think potentially a case might be the right way to do it. So we're going to pipe into a case, and we'll say number string without country code. And actually we want to do this after kernel.toCharList because that's where we can get the length properly. Number string without country code. And we're going to do a test with length is equal to 10. And we'll do number string with country code. When length number string with country code is equal to 11. And we'll do something there. And for all other cases, it means we have an invalid phone number. So if the only valid cases for the North American numbers is whether we have one without a country code or with a country code. Without a country code, it's 10 digits. With a country code, it's 11 digits. So all other cases are actually invalid. So if we then, instead of invalid, what we actually want is, we want 10 zeros basically. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And actually, let's double check that because that one's got the country code. Let's double check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Perfect. So that's our indicator that the number is invalid. So if we have a number string with a country code, what do we want to do? So if we have something with the country code, we want to get the country code. So we'll just make that nil for a while. And then rest of number. And then we want to do something conditionally based on the country code. So we're going to have something, so if country code is equal to, and actually, because this will spit out an integer, we're going to have to find out what the integer is for that thing. So let me reverse back out of that. We'll deal with that later. So the number string without the country code. So when we don't have a country code in there, we're going to do exactly what we had here. So this one. So we have a number string, and it's not a string, it's actually a list. So let's go number, char list without country code. Just name it correctly. We have a number instead of a string, it's char list. So let me just do that. Char list with country code. Okay, and with this, let's just return this out of there. And we don't want this. That can go at the end because that's a common thread. So let's do our tests again. Undefined function, number string. So this one is still referring to the wrong variable. It should be char list. Let's run our tests again. So we should have just one failure, but we're failing on multiple tests. The first one is when we pass in the valid, that's the invalid number, but when we pass in the valid number with the correct country code, because we haven't correctly handled that case. So to get the country code, what we want is list.first from our number char list, and that's going to give us the char code of the first digit. So for example, let's jump into IEX just to have a look at what that looks like. So if we have 1, 2, 3 as a char list and we do list.first, it's going to give us 49, which is the integer char code. And I think if we do kernel.toString, because it's not a list, it's just going to give 49 as a string. That's fine. If we know the character code for the digit 1, which is 49, then we can handle it in there. So maybe that's fine. Country code. List.first, so that's going to give us 49. If we want to convert that to a string, what would be the best way to do that? So we could do that. Make it a list, and then kernel.toString. So for example, if we do, let's try that in here. So this is pulling out the first digit, putting it inside a list, just so it's a list of one thing, and then converting that to a string. Okay. Oh yeah, we can't pipe into this. So what we're going to do, just put that in there. Okay, so that gives us 1 as a string. I think that's going to be more readable in the code, because if we're checking that country code is equal to 49, which is the char code for 1, it's going to make our code a little bit unreadable. It's better if we have it as a string. So let's call this country code string, just so we're 100% clear about what the data type is, because Elixir is not strongly typed. So rest of number as a char list. And what that's going to be is our enum.slice of the rest of the number. And we'll just pass in this as the first argument. So what are we going to have here? We're going to have a string of the country code, and we're going to have a char list of the remainder of the number. So what we want to check here is if the country code string is equal to 1, then we want to do the same thing that we do here, which is just return the rest of number char list. If it's not 1, which means it's an invalid number, we just want to return this one. And so since we're duplicating this, I'm going to put it into a module variable. So we'll call this default number. We'll paste that there. And so got some more functions down here. Instead of returning this, we're going to return default number, and the same here, default number. So format the code. So that's nice. So when we have the case where we've only passed in 10 digits, all we do is we slice out the last 10 digits, and actually we don't even need this because we've already checked the length. So we literally just return the char list without the country code. We haven't done any validation, which we're going to need to do eventually. But when we have the number char list with country code, so that's when the length is 11, what we're going to do is pull out the country code as a string, so we have a nice easy comparison. We're going to get the rest of it. We're going to slice just the last 10 digits without the country code. If the country code is 1, we'll return the rest of the char list. Otherwise, because it's invalid, we're going to return the default number. If I run our tests now, unless I have some errors in my code, this should pass. Good. Let's uncomment the next test. If it's 9 digits, it should be invalid. That's fine, and that's because we've handled it with both our cases. So it's only valid or potentially valid if we have 10 digits or 11 digits. And so we've automatically handled the case with 9. Let's check. Okay, so this fails. And this is because we've stripped out letters. So you can see here that what this should return is the invalid phone number. But in our code, because we're stripping out everything that's not a digit, what's actually happening is that because we have a valid number in here, 21255500100, but we've interspersed it with letters, that means that because we're stripping it out, we're actually getting a valid number out when we strip it out, but it's not a valid number at all. So really all we should be stripping out is these punctuation marks. And so if we go back to the README, so we have dashes, spaces, and dots. And so what we can do is instead of removing anything that's not a digit, we can just remove those. And then if we have letters in there, that will mean that the length of the number will not be correct. So I wonder what the best way to do this would be. So I'm just thinking ahead, because if we, let's say for instance, we pass in something like this. We do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, A, B, C, D, A, B, C, D, E. If we strip out anything that is a dot or an open brackets or a dash, this is going to come through and it's going to pass this case. So if it's going to pass that, then we're going to return that and it's going to be invalid. So we should probably do a check in there beforehand that we have all digits at some point. So we can probably do a string.match in there instead. So let me just think. Pull up string.match. Cool. So what we can do first, let's do the string.replace. So let's make that. So if it's not a digit, not open brackets, not close brackets, not a dash, and not a space, and not a dot, then we want to replace it with that. Actually, no. When it is those things, so when it is any of those things, we want to replace it with this one. And so let's just put this into IEX. I'm going to comment this first just to test it, and we'll test it in IEX to make sure that things are working as expected. So jump back into IEX. Let's load our code. Okay, out of range. So that might be one of these items. Let's do that. There we go. I've just put a backslash in front of all the characters. So what we want to do is we want to call phone.number. And what we'll do is we'll pass in, let's pass in the failing test item. And we'll see what happens. Okay, so it hasn't stripped that out. Let's try it again with phone.number. And we'll try it again with one of the things that has passed. And we'll make sure that it's coming out the way that we expect. Okay, so we also need the plus in there that we're matching with the string.replace. So we got plus. Let's just put a backslash and run on that too to be safe. Try that again. And that's what we expect out. And in the case when we have the A's in there, that's fine. So then what we should do, let's pass it into a function called is number string valid. And so all this is going to do, let's just create a new one down here. We'll do def p is number string valid. What we'll do in here is we'll do not string dot match. So actually, no, we're not going to do that. We'll do string dot match and then number string. Actually, let me just put that on top. Number string. And what we're going to do is we're going to check if it matches anything that is not a digit, right? So what we expect is if we remove plus open brackets, open parentheses, close parentheses, hyphen, space, and dot, we expect to only get numbers out. And if we get anything other than numbers out, then the actual phone number that we've passed in, even with the formatting, is invalid. So let's test that. So for example, we have this one. Let's pass this into string.match. We'll do our regular expression. Sorry. It's undefined or private. Oh yeah, question mark. So that matches. So we actually want the inverse of that. So we can either, actually we could do some validation on the length there as well, because really what we want is we want digits of length 10 or 11. So for example, if we do that, digits of 10 or 11, so that's invalid. Whereas if we do this one, sorry, yeah, phone number, and then we do string.match \d 10 or 11. So that's also, oh, sorry, I've put the wrong one in there. It's this one. And let me copy that instead to not waste your time. True, because that will return a valid one. So is number string valid? Good, we've got our little validation. And then what we can do is we can put that into a case and do something on it. So this one should not be a pipe. What we'll do is we can maybe do it in a cond or a case or an if. Let's just start off with an if. Is number string valid? And then we need to is number string valid? We've got our number string. So if it is valid, then we want to do our case. And if it's invalid, we just want to return our default number. And that's as a char list. Let's just get all this default number, char list. Cool. We can just pipe that into kernel.toString. And then what we want here is number string. We want to convert it to kernel.toCharList. And then we want to do our case. We can unnest this later. I'm just going to copy our case from there, paste it in there. Let's uncomment all of this, format the code. So we'll clean this up later, but this should be working now. So this is doing some validation. So first thing that we're doing is we're stripping all of the formatting characters out of there, and we can maybe make a function that explains that more clearly. We're checking if the number string is valid. So what we get out of this function should be literally just a string of digits of length 10 or 11, then what we're doing is inside there, sorry, just let me get a drink. What we're doing after that is converting the valid number string into a char list and then doing the same case that we were doing before. So the case when it's 10, the case when it's 11, and then our default case. And we're passing all of it into kernel.toString because what we get out of all of these is a char list, and then we're converting it back to a string. So now if we run the tests, we still have one failure. Let's check which one that is. So that is when that phone number is passed in. That should return that. What we're returning is an empty list. So let's see here. Where is this failing? So that will get into here. It will be, okay, this is because we still have this default number. That's undefined because we changed it to char list. That was a sloppy change on my part. So now we have all those tests passing. Let's jump back in. Run the tests again. That one passes as well. So now we have a failure. So invalid when area code begins with 1. And this is because we haven't addressed this issue where our area code or our exchange code, the first number in there should be either a 2 through 9, so it can't be 0 through 9 as these X's are. So if we jump back to our code, what I'd like to decide is whether I want to validate it in here or validate it when we have the char list including the country code. So the advantage of doing it in here, when it says a list, is because we can use enum.at. We don't have to use any string matching, right? So what we can do is, I'm concerned about validating things multiple times just because it starts to make the code a little bit unreadable. So what we can do instead is, because we basically want to validate the char list rather than validating the string, to be honest. Let's see, what do I want to do here? So really what we can do is we can have another function that accepts the char list of the digits, and then what we can do is go through each element in the char list or pick out the specific elements in the char list depending on the number that's passed in. So for example, is number char list valid? And then we have the number char list. And then what we want is we want 2 clauses of this. Actually, no, let's do it just on 10, because then what we can do is validate in here. So when we have this length 10 number char list without country code and the rest of the number char list, which would be that 10 digit, we can be validating that. The problem with that is that we get really heavy nesting in our case statement, which is no good for readability. So what we can actually do to validate these particular things is, I think the cleanest way might be to match, do an actual string regex. So really what we want is we can have a very specific regex in here to check whether it's valid. And actually what we can do is, instead of using a char list, we can actually pull things out with the regex match. So for instance, let's do our string.match, and we've got our number string, and let's make a regex that will actually validate exactly what we want. So we have 2 cases. We have one case where we have a 1 at the front, and this is after we've removed any of the formatting characters. So what we should have left is a 1 at the front, and then we want 2 to 9 in the following, and then we want 2 digits. So if we go back to the README, you can see here that we have a case where there might be a 1 at the front or there might not be a 1 at the front. So let me just do that. So we have that case, we have this case, right? So we're doing that 1 first. And I'm not going to do conditional matches or anything like that. And actually we might be able to do this with that and remove this. So we'll test this regex in IEX, but I'm just going to write it out first. So we have either 1, I'm going to just put this marker at the front. We either have 1 or nothing. Then we have 2 to 9 and 3 digits, which represents our area code. Then we have another 2 to 9 and another 2 digits, which represents our exchange code. And then we have, we have another 4 digits, so this could just be 6, right? So what we can do is, what we want is to test this. And what I'm going to do is just make that public. We'll jump back into IEX and test this one. Let's load our code. Phone.is number string valid. And what we'll do is we'll pass in a valid string. So, for example, this one we know is valid. Pass that in. That should return true. If we put a 1 at the front of this, that should also return true. If we put a 2 in front, that should return false. So that's returning true as well. So that is no good. And I think it might be because we haven't said that. So we've still got that in there. And we're also going to do an end of string marker. Let's reload the code. Test that one. That's false. That should be true. That should also be true. And now I think it's working as expected. So this regular expression matches exactly one of the valid phone number strings that we expect. So let's test another invalid one. So for example, if we make the, this is the area code. If we make the area code 1, that should be invalid. Good. If we put that back to 6, that should be valid again. And then we want to change this 9 to a 0 or a 1 to test if our exchange code, and that's also false. So this regular expression is working as expected. So now we can be sure that if our number string is valid, we have, and actually this completely removes this check that we have, right? Because if you remember correctly, this was the case when we had the country code. We're already validating. So here, if we've got this conditional statement, we're already validating this is now a regular expression. So we can actually completely remove this case, right? So, and since we're validating the length, this case is really no longer necessary. So the only thing that we're going to get in here is a valid char list. That's the only thing that we're going to get. So actually, if we do that, and we go out, we should still have passing tests. Let's see which ones we've failed. That's because we haven't stripped. So what we want to do is get our enum.slice back. That's because we still have the enum.slice, and what we want is -10 to -1. Let's try that again with the tests. Okay, and now all our tests are passing, and we've cleaned up our code significantly just by making sure that our regular expression actually matches the exact number strings that we expect out of it. And this is often a good procedure to follow. I'm surprised I didn't follow this first. If you're really explicit with a regular expression, it can save you a whole lot of conditional formatting. If you have any questions about this regular expression, feel free to send me any questions in Twitch or YouTube or Twitter, and I'll explain this regular expression to you. Regular expressions, if you're not familiar with them, can look really complex, but actually they're extremely powerful and extremely simple. So just as a quick recommendation, I recommend this website, which is regexer. So that's regexr.com. And this lets you play around with regular expressions, and it will give you explanations of exactly what the regular expressions are that you're dealing with, and it also gives you a cheat sheet. So this is actually where I learned regular expressions. So for instance, if we just want to match regexa, you can see down here that it's only highlighting that match, right? And let's say, for example, we want to match any digit between 0 and 9. We can see here that there aren't actually any digits between 0 and 9. So if we do 0, 1, 2, 3, etc. And this is what you'll actually see in the cheat sheet over on the left-hand side. Anyway, I digress. Let's get out of there and we'll get back to the code. So now that we have a proper valid string, we can just make it a char list, slice off the first digit, and then convert it back to a string. So now those tests are passing. We're going to uncomment more of the tests to see if we're still passing. Good. Invalid when exchange code begins with a 1. Good. We're testing all these in our regular expression. Good. Invalid when exchange code begins with a 0. Area code. All right, so we have a failure. Let's have a look. Okay, and this is because we're using a new function now. If you have a look here, this is calling phone.areaCode. We've only done phone.number. So we actually need to implement phone.areaCode. And the way that we would do that is jump back into phone number and we'll have a look. Phone.areaCode. Extract the area code from a phone number, returns the first 3 digits from a phone number, ignoring the long distance indicator. So you can see here that this is, if it's an invalid phone number like this one, it's going to return zeros. So actually I think the easiest way to implement this is just by leveraging our phone number function that we used before. So as we remember, our phone number function takes in a raw number and then returns an expected length of 10 with the area code as the first 3. So really what we're doing here is we know that this is either going to return 10 zeros if it's invalid, or it's going to return a valid phone number string. So what we get out is a string, and what we want is the first 3 characters of that string. For me, I think that probably, again, unless I'm... let's jump into the string module. I don't think there's a way to extract a slice from a string. Oh no, there is slice. What am I doing? So if we go back, I still think that probably... No, so we don't even need to convert this to a char list. Let's just use string.slice. And what we'll do is make sure that all our tests are still passing, apart from that phone number 1. Find function phone number. Sorry, it should just be number. That's right, just number, not phone number. Cool. So we still only have 1 failure, which means that I was barking up the wrong tree by converting it to a char list. We can just use string.slice, which does the same thing as enum.slice, but with strings instead of lists. So that's fine. Let's jump down to area code. So this is going to return a number string, and actually all we want here is just the first 3 digits, right? Which is either going to be 0, 3 zeros for an invalid, or the actual area code for a valid phone number. Again, we're going to use string.slice, and the way that we get the first 3 is we use 0.3. Let me just confirm that in IEX. So if we have 1, 2, 3, 4, we use string.slice and we go 0.3. Okay, 2, right, so it's going to be indexed and it's inclusive. So 0.2 returns the first 3 characters of that string. And if we run the tests now, that should all be passing. Perfect. Let's go area code with full US phone number. That should also pass because we're stripping out the the country code in the number function. Cool, invalid area code, no area code. Cool, all still passing. Then we have pretty print, and that will fail because we haven't implemented the function. So let's have a look here. Wraps the area code in parentheses and separates exchange and subscriber number with a dash. So what we can do first is We have our area code, which we can just leverage our area code function. Let's just call this area code string. And we'll do the area code function on raw. And then what we want is we want the exchange number. Exchange code string. And what we're going to do there is a string.slice again. And this one is going to be from 3 to 6. Let's just check that in IEX again. So for instance, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And we'll go string.slice 3.6. That should give us 4, 5, 6. That gives us 4, 5, 6, 7. I apologize. 4, 5, 6. Make that 5. So that's our exchange code. And then our subscriber number. String.slice. Actually, I wonder if there's a function in the string module that allows us to just put in a character at a particular index, because that's exactly what we need to do. If we could just put in an open parentheses, so that's a pad leading, I know that one. This one, no, I think it's just going to be easier and more readable if we do it this way. So this will be 6.9, and we'll do that again. It's going to be 10 digits. Let's try 6.9, right? And that gives us our last 4 digits. And then what we want to do is we want to turn a properly formatted string. So in this case, we'll have the area code string inside the parentheses, a space, then the exchange code string, then a dash, and then the subscriber number string. Okay, and we can just test that with the tests rather than doing it in IEX. So we still have a failure. Let's see what we printed. String.slice is undefined or private. Okay, so I'm making a mistake here, and we shouldn't be passing in the raw, because what we want is the phone number string first, which is treated, and that is number with raw. And the area code function is going to work on raw, but these other ones are going to need a treated string. So we'll pass in the treated string. Sorry, jumping around. Let's try that again. And now we have 0 failures. So that is returning the correct result. Let's do another one. Pretty print with full US phone number. That should pass as well. Let's have a look. Pretty print invalid US phone number. That should work too because we return it. Let's have a look. And finally, pretty print invalid short US phone number. That should also work. Excellent. So all our tests are passing. This exercism example is complete. So let's have a look at what we've done and see if we have any opportunities to clean up the code at all. I think this is pretty much as clean as it's going to get unless we convert these into their own functions. But I think it's probably not worth it simply because this is literally a one-liner. All we're doing here is converting it. Let's do that just as an example. So we can make it a def p. We can do, let's call it get exchange code, and then that'll be raw. And then all we're doing is we're taking raw, applying the number function, and then applying string.slice. Okay, 3 to 5. And we'll do, do another one. We'll call it get subscriber number. And again, we'll pass in the raw. It's going to be the same as this, except it's going to be 6 to 9. And then in here, what we can do is we can get rid of this line. Get exchange code raw. Get subscriber number raw. And that's cleaned it up slightly. We have some repetition in here, but honestly, I think that it's small enough that it doesn't really matter. What you could do, for instance, is you could make the range configurable and then pass it to another function. but I think this is just as clear as it's going to get. Like a 3-line little function, it's not worth doing any more than that. It's over refactoring. So here we have area code, exchange code string, subscriber number string. All our tests should still be passing. No, so we have a problem here. Whoops, apologies. We have, where are we looking here? So this should not be phone number string. This should literally just be that. Apologies. Let's run the test again. And we still have all our tests passing. This is a little bit cleaner. It's a little bit longer, but if we ever have any problems with this function, we can change it separately. Let's go back and see if we have any other opportunities. I don't see any opportunities for refactoring here. This is about as clean as it'll get. Again, we can maybe rename this. We can have another function that gets this value and puts it in this function, but it's not worth it. Let's go up here. So the one thing here that I see as an opportunity to refactor is this function, because with refactoring, what we're trying to do is not necessarily just reduce the number of lines of code. Is what we want to do is make our intention clear and actually say what we're doing. So what is this function doing? What that function is doing is it's stripping formatting characters. That's all it's doing. Excuse me. It's going to leave digits. It's only stripping formatting characters. And what I'm going to do is, this one should be private anyway, so we don't need to expose this. And the other thing that we can do is we can move our private functions to the bottom. If a private function is only used by a function, I don't mind keeping it nearby, but in general, let's say this isNumberStringValid is used by multiple functions, I would move it down to the bottom of the file. But anyway, that's for another time. Let's create a function that does literally just this, and we'll name it what it's actually doing. So what we'll do is we'll call this strip formatting characters. It's going to be raw. Okay. And then in here, the number string, we'll just call this strip formatting characters raw. Okay. And then we're also doing the check here of whether it's valid. And the only other thing, so actually what we're doing here is because we've used string.slice, we're actually no longer dealing with char lists. So instead of returning that, let's convert this default number char list. We'll do that as string, and we'll convert this to a string rather than a char list. So that's our default phone number. We've already got that in there, and we no longer need that kernel to string because we're no longer dealing with char lists. So I'm going to remove that, and that's cleaned up our function significantly. This one as well, I don't think it's worth refactoring that simply because it's about as simple as you can get. It's very clear that this is literally just taking the last 10 digits in the number string if it's a valid number. Okay, so we've got isNumberStringValid. We've got our specific match in there. That's about as clean as I think we're going to get in this. So I'm going to run the tests again just to make sure that with our code changes, it's still all working. And yes, all our tests are passing, 0 failures. I'm going to do Command Option L just to format the code in case I haven't formatted it correctly. And that looks pretty good to me. And I think we're done. So what I'm going to do is Exercism submit, and then what is it called? Phone number.exs. Boom, done. It's very nice. We'll open this in Chrome and take a look. Well done on solving this exercise. Thank you, Exercism. I think this was a pretty good one. We've got our code here, and I'll link this solution up in any of the descriptions for this video, and you can take a look at this solution. I'll also put an article on toptechskills.com that explains how I arrived at this solution. So I'm going to mark this solution as complete. Done. Cool. So let's go back to our Elixir track and see what we've got coming up tomorrow. So this nth prime one I've already done. I did that a little while ago. So that's been imported. We could maybe do it again, but instead of doing that one again, I'm going to go straight to Roman numerals simply because I want these to be me solving these problems straight off the bat without having seen them. So tomorrow we'll do Roman numerals. And that's it. Thanks a lot for watching. And if you have any questions, please post them in Twitch, YouTube, Twitter, anywhere that you can reach me. I'm happy to answer any of your questions. I can make a follow-up video or write an article, whichever way you prefer. Yeah, thanks for watching and see you tomorrow.